Well, hello there. My name is Ian, and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today, I've brought my friend Jonathan Cornell from Immersive Audio Album, and we are going to talk about the spring 2026 5.1 Dolby Atmos and other surround releases. So let's get underway, Jonathan. I believe these are already released. This is Rhino's Quadio series.
So this is the 11th Quadio batch. So isn't that crazy? Wow. The 11th batch of 4 titles. So they've really been putting the pedal to the metal, sort of digging up these old quad releases from the Warner vaults. But so I have the vinyl of all of these except for Curtis Mayfield Back to the World, because that record was not released on quad vinyl. There was only a reel-to-reel and 8-track version of it, which I've never heard. But I could say that the other 3, Modern Jazz Quartet, Graham Central Station Spinners, I would say these are all very good quad mixes. This Spinners release completes the set, by the way. The debut album, New and Improved, and Pick of the Litter were the 3 that were released in quad. So now those are all out on Blu-ray. So that's pretty cool. I would say the highlight for me, both music and mix-wise of this set, is the Graham Central Station record. So interestingly, that was one of the last quad releases from the Warner Elektra Atlantic label. It was released, I think, 1975. And it's a very cool kind of like R&B funk, Sly and the Family Stone kind of album. If you dig that kind of sound, I think you'll really enjoy it. And the quad mixes, lots of discrete separation of parts. There are a few bits where things fly around the room. 70s quad mixes are never less than interesting. And I think this set very much sort of continues that theme.
I think I've said a few times that there's not a whole lot of funk music in multi-channel, and sometimes jazz is hit or miss. Like, you have the Miles Davis albums like Bitches Brew and Live Evil. But it seems like this is a set of Quadio titles that's specifically tailored toward funk and jazz interest. So I'm kind of interested in all 4 of them myself.
And I would mention as well that the Modern Jazz Quartet, The Last Concert, I know a lot of people like to assume that typically like live records don't really translate well to surround, but it's very much like a sort of middle of the band kind of mix.
Well, Joni Mitchell's Miles of Isles would like to differ with you there.
Yes, that's maybe the ultimate middle of the band mix.
We're moving on to February 27th, which is right around the corner. And this is the Hawkwind self-titled box set with new 5.1 mixes from the always dependable Stephen W. Taylor. And I think I previously announced on our last, our 2026 surround mix video that I would most likely not be reviewing this title. Well, that has changed. A friend and viewer of the channel has gifted me a copy of this. So I'm just waiting for it to arrive in the mail. And once it does, I believe Jonathan and I will be doing a discussion on it. So I'm really excited to hear this. Perhaps, Jonathan, you could talk about your experience with the previous Hawkwind 5.1 mixes, because I'm guessing this is a band that you didn't listen to, before the 5.1 mixes came out.
Yeah, I think I talked a little bit about it when we talked about this title previously in that 2026 preview video, which was probably like a month or 2 ago now. But I started with Warrior on the Edge of Time, which was the one that Steven Wilson mixed. And then the one I go back to the most is actually the Days of the Underground box set. The Quark, Strangeness, and Charm album, I think, has a really fun 5.1 mix by Steven Wilson. And aside from that, I have the standalone edition of Space Ritual that was done by Stephen W. Taylor. And I also think that was a very well done surround mix. The other ones I haven't heard, Hall of the Mountain Grill, In Search of Space. I think there's one more, Do Re Mi.
Well, I do think it's important to note that the Hall of the Mountain Grill album was a case where the multi-tracks were missing.
Yes.
And Stephen W. Taylor had to rely on an AI algorithm to demix those tracks from the stereo master tapes. And I believe that he was able to make significant improvements on the original stereo mix. This is a case where the multi-tracks were available. It's always been been a case for me that, at least so far, whenever an album has been AI demixed in that way, sure, it may sound better. The improvements may be made, but it doesn't sound as good as a true mix from the multi-tracks, and I don't think it ever will. So this should be a return to the excellent sound quality of albums like In Search of Space, or I'm sorry, Zin Search of Space, and the Space Ritual album. So I'm actually really looking forward to hearing it, because all I know about this record is that it's extremely psychedelic, and it's also a little bit different for them. I think somebody from the band Gong appears, so it's going to be an interesting one to dive into.
And Cherry Red always does a great job on these box sets.
So. Oh, they do. Yeah, live material, extras. And I think that, as somebody who is a progressive rock fan, but didn't necessarily get into Hawkwind on my first kind of era of discovering progressive music, I think that part of the reason why I had trouble appreciating them is that the mixes are very rough. The original mixes are extremely rough of these albums. And Stephen W. Taylor has done the Lord's work, I think, in bringing these in high fidelity audio. So this will be an interesting one to check out, and I'm really looking forward to it. So on the same day, this is February 27th, shipping from Super Deluxe Edition is Quadrophonia by The Who, and this has been mixed by Richard Whittaker. Now, you mentioned that you've maybe heard this on streaming?
Yeah, so the release history by this one is actually quite complex. So people may remember, I think around 2011, there was a super deluxe box set of this album that came with a DVD that had only half the album mixed in 5.1. They called it like the Quadrophonia EP or something. I don't know why that was the case. Maybe they couldn't find all the tapes at the time. And then a couple years later, I want to say in 2014, there was a standalone Blu-ray that had the whole record in 5.1. So I do have the standalone Blu-ray from back then, which is credited to Bob Pridden and Richard Whittaker. And then this new Atmos mix popped up on streaming services maybe a year or two ago. And I'm assuming that what's on the Blu-ray is evidently the same as the Atmos streaming. And it also comes with the 2011 half the album mixed in 5.1. Not the whole album from 2014, just the 2011 EP version they were able to get on the SDE Blu-ray. I don't know why that is, but I mean, I think the 5.1 Blu-ray was pretty good. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it as much as the Who mixes that Steven Wilson has done, like the Who Are You and Who's Next, or even the vintage 5.1 of Tommy that was done by Pete Townsend himself, back in 2003 or 2004. But I'm glad that the Atmos mix isn't exclusive to streaming, and I'm curious to see, how this will turn out.
Yeah, I am too. And, The Who is one of those bands that I'm this far away from getting into all the time. I really wanted the Who's Next Blu-ray from SDE, but I don't think I understood the SDE release strategy back when that came out, because I think that's been a year now since that came out, and I just assumed, well, it's available for pre-order, I'll get it when it comes out.
Oh, I got the huge box set of that,
which
was the biggest box I've got. But I do love that record, and it was worth it because not just the main album was mixed in Atmos, also there was basically a second album's worth of extra songs that Steven also mixed in 5.1 in Atmos.
Well, that's a major gap in my Steven Wilson mixes collection, and I hope that SDE does reprint it, because obviously they have reprinted The Hurting by Tears for Fears, which we didn't include on the list, but it is coming. Steven always does a wonderful job, and I got to say regarding Richard Whittaker, he did mix Bridge of Sighs by Robin Trower a few years back, and I feel like that's a mix that isn't well talked about, but it's one that I've returned to a few times since it's come out, and I really like it. So I think Whittaker does do solid work.
One mix of his that I just heard and I just did a review of for IA was the Yes Fly From Here return trip. I thought he did a great job mixing that in Atmos. But granted, there's a lot more instrumentation on that record than there is on a lot of these vintage, 70s recordings. But yeah, he's done a lot of good stuff. There's the Thin Lizzy records. You mentioned Bridge of Sighs. He did the Atmos mix of the Pixies Doolittle record, which we have on IAA. So yeah, he's definitely kind of someone to watch.
He seems to be the go-to guy for hard rock. And Atmos, which is interesting. But as for me and The Who, again, they're a band that's always just somewhat out of reach for me. The one title that I hope happens one day is the Who Sell Out. I hope that the multi-tracks exist for that, because I think Sell Out would make an absolutely sensational Atmos mix.
The only thing I would say on that is they did a huge box set of the Who Sell Out that had no surround, so which is maybe not a good sign, but
that doesn't bode well, does it?
We've seen other instances of that sort of thing where an album will be released. The Hurting's a good example. They did a box set of that with no surround, and then they did the surround version like 10 years later. So you never know.
Yeah. On March 6th, we have the new record from Squeeze entitled Trixies. And this is this is almost like 20 years ago. We got the CDs, we got the Blu-ray. Tell us about this release. I don't know about this band.
Yeah, neither do I. The reason I flagged this was because I saw it had a mix by Bob Clearmountain. So I went on Apple Music. They have a couple of preview tracks out, and the surround mix is, up to his usual high standard, vocals in the center, keyboards in the back, some percussion in the sides, lots of cool stuff happening all around. So I saw this is like coming out like a $20 Blu-ray, and I like the music. It seems like kind of a sort of alt rock kind of thing. And for $20, I'm in.
Sure. And word to the wise, whenever you see one of these Atmos Blu-rays released or available for pre-order, it is a good idea to check to see who does the mixing, because oftentimes it's a way to avoid disappointment. If it's a trusted mixer who's behind the mix, it's generally worth your hard-earned cash. If you don't know the mixer, you might want to sample it on streaming first and make sure. When it comes to Bob Clearmountain, Steven Wilson, in some regards, Richard Whittaker or Stephen W. Taylor or any of those kind of guys, generally I might take a chance on one of those. So yeah, if you like Bob Clearmountain's work and if you like this kind of rock and roll music, you might want to check it out for $20. Hey, why not?
The other thing I did a little bit of, like, I just read the press release for this record, and apparently like these are old songs. Like they wrote these songs quite a long time ago, but they just recorded them. So it's kind of like a new old record. But it's cool that they're doing a physical release of the Atmos mix, because a lot of the recent Atmos mixes that Clearmountain has done for like newer acts, like, Joe Bonamassa's Time Clocks, or Brittany Howard from Alabama Shakes, he mixed her solo record in Atmos. Those have not been released outside of streaming.
March 13th.
I bet you've got a lot to say about this one.
I was going to say, here's a controversial title to dig our heels into. So the Grace Under Pressure box set is coming out from Rush. And gosh, there's so much to dig into here. I think the big topic is the price. It's going for $300, and basically what you're getting is 4 CDs and a Blu-ray, and included in this box is a newly mastered version of the 1984 Grace Under Pressure album, but we're also getting a new mix from the band's original producer and engineer Terry Brown, and there is a preview track out today, which I'll talk about in just a moment, but we also get 2 discs of the band live at Toronto's Maple Leaf Gardens. And this was a concert that was initially released on VHS and Laserdisc under the title Grace Under Pressure Live. And coupled with A Show of Hands concert from a few years later, both of those VHS tapes formed the backbone of my appreciation and discovery of Rush as a young person. So all this is to say is the content of this is very exciting for me, because in addition to this, we also get the full film for the first time. So it's an unedited concert, and the album mixed for Dolby Atmos by the band's longstanding mixing engineer, Richard Schicky. So a lot of controversy around this, mostly around the price, which I mentioned is expensive compared to other similar releases. I did get a chance to check out Terry Brown's remix of the opening track, Distant Early Warning. And I did raise concerns on my announcement video of this because famously, like if you read Geddy Lee's autobiography, he talks about how dissatisfied Terry Brown was with the direction of the band at the time. He did produce Signals, but like he wasn't a fan of New World Man, which was, a hit song from that record. popular song from that record. He wasn't a fan of the reggae direction or the implementation of synthesizers. Terry was saying things like, "You guys are one of the best rock trios in the world. Why are you heading in this direction?" And the band decided that they needed to move on without him because obviously they had different interests, different priorities. And, they had contacted Trevor Horn at one point to produce this album, which I think would have been absolutely so amazingly interesting if that would have happened. But it ended up the producer that they went with, Peter Henderson, was kind of not really a producer. And they kind of had to produce this all themselves. And with Henderson kind of overseeing the mix, and that title, Grace Under Pressure, comes from the experience of making this album. It was a very difficult time in the band. And, I raise some concerns about Terry Brown approaching this mix because, as Steven Wilson has famously said, Steven doesn't mix albums that he doesn't love, because he said that he feels like it will show in the mixing somehow, that it could affect the mix if he doesn't love the work that he's doing. And that's my concern with Terry Brown working on this material. However, I did listen to Terry's mix, and it's pretty good, actually. I thought that the snare drum in particular was forward in the mix, which was nice to hear. I thought that it had nice dynamics, nice clarity around all the instruments. Geddy's voice sounded fantastic. There was maybe some reverb or delay on Geddy's voice that I could tell wasn't original and maybe seemed a little bit invasive, but it was dynamic. It sounded good. I didn't hear any, heavy-handed compression or anything like that. I did notice that the synthesizers are definitely back in the mix, and that concerns me a little bit because obviously that synthesizer sound is part of the DNA of this album. It's part of the identity of this album. And I think that the concern about having a complete mix by Terry is that it would give credence to people who don't like this album. But, maybe if that invites them in, maybe they'll appreciate it more. I don't know. Anyway, I'm actually very curious to hear this whole set. I find the idea of Terry Brown doing an alternate mix fascinating, to say the least. So, I'd be interested to hear what he does with the rest of it. And I'm interested in the show. I'm interested in the new mix from Shicky. Again, the only thing stopping me from jumping on this is the price.
We were just talking about the Who, like the Who's Next Lifehouse box set, which was the same price. It was $2.99. that had 10 CDs and a Blu-ray, and this only has 4.
Yeah.
So, but to your point about the surround mix, I think, Richard Schicky has been getting better and better with his mixes of Rush material. Like we were talking about it. We were talking about in the video we did with Mike and Ryan that we all agreed the recent Atmos mixes he did of moving pictures and signals were much better than the 5.1s he did maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I would say his most successful mix for me was the recent Atmos version of Signals that came out in 2023, I think. Mm-hmm. And this album, I guess you could say it has kind of similar textures as Signals, certainly in the use that there's more sort of synth elements, a bit more reverb. So I'm curious to see if that is sort of more suited to his style, as opposed to an album like Moving Pictures or A Farewell to Kings. I much prefer the 5.1 mix that Steven Wilson did back in 2017. So chances are, I'll be probably listening to this on streaming, but I'm glad it's getting the surround mix.
Yeah, and people have been waiting for this box set for a couple years. Maybe they thought it wasn't going to happen. I have mixed feelings on all this extra swag going into it. And somebody yelled at me in a comment today about all the books cost more money, all the artwork, all that other stuff. And you got to look at the Peter Hamill box set that came out last year. And I realized that comparing Peter Hamill to Rush is apples and oranges at best. But you have 18 discs and something like 10 or 12 different albums. There's 2 surround mixes. There's a hardback book, and it was like half the price. This is a box set around 1 album. And I kind of feel like at this price point, they should be offering the entire Rush catalog mixed by Chicky. I might jump in on that for $300.
you could even argue like the Who's Next box set wasn't really about one album. It was about like this period of the band, like, 1970 to like 72, in the sense that it has both the Who's Next and Lifehouse. So it's kind of like a double album. But yeah, this is just like your regular, one album. So I don't know. One question I do have is the Terry Brown stereo mix being released outside the box set?
No, not yet.
Wow.
Anyway. Yeah.
But it's probably going on streaming.
It is,
with the rest of it. Yeah. That's surprising that they are not going to put out a standalone CD or vinyl of that or something.
I mean, who knows? In 6 months' time, maybe they might see that the numbers are decent. But I think this is another case, like, we talked about on the video that's coming on your channel, where like the Yes set, Tales from Topographic Oceans, where, it's hard to meet everybody's demands to press a Blu-ray, to press a vinyl set, to press CDs. So what do the record companies do? Just throw it all in one box and
exactly
let us all sort it out. And I think that's what's going on here. Other than that, extremely mixed feelings on the cover. I don't understand why Rush has to redo their covers for these box sets, because the originals are really amazing. This doesn't really do it for me, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that maybe after it's out for a little while that it might be reduced in price on Amazon for like 150 or something like that. I might feel a little bit better about jumping on that.
I mean, that's what happened with the moving pictures and Signals boxes.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember it, that the Signals one was available for like $75 at one point, and I passed on it. Maybe I shouldn't have. But in terms of content, this is clearly the best Rush set yet. They haven't offered a full concert film video like this, and the video has been mixed for Atmos too. So
that's true. Yeah.
All this is to say is that I really want it, but I don't know if I want it for the price. So we'll just have to see. You'll have to let me know in the comments below if you would be interested in a review of this, because I'm sure if me and Mike got into this, we could go on for hours. Now, here's a release that I'm extremely enthusiastic about. And talk
about swinging all the way in the other direction of value for your money.
Oh yeah. Well, I was going to bring up the fact that Jethro Tull and Zappa seem to be able to make these box sets that are, great bang for your buck, and again, they don't cost that much. Like it's great content wise, and they don't cost that much. And in this case, even before I was an Atmos music head, I wanted a complete concert from the Bongo Fury tour. So this is the 1975 hybrid album, I guess you could say, of live material taken from Austin, Texas in early 75, with a few select studio tracks that were recorded at the tail end of the One Size Fits All sessions. And I believe that would have been like the spring 1975 Record Plant sessions, not Caribou Ranch. So this does capture Frank Zappa in a bit of a transitional period where Ruth Underwood had left. Chester Thompson had his eyes on Genesis, although I think at this point he had left for Weather Report. And basically the classic lineup of the Mothers of Invention that produced albums like Overnight Sensation, Apostrophe, and One Size Fits All had finally begun to disintegrate a little bit. And so what Frank did is he looked to his childhood friends and brought Denny Wally, who plays slide guitar, and Don Van Vliet, better known as Captain Beefheart, as a singer. And at this point, Captain Beefheart had been signing every contract that landed under his nose. So he was basically in this position where he couldn't make a move without violating a contract somewhere. And he was broke. He couldn't tour. He couldn't record. And Frank said, well, I'm putting this new band together, and why don't you come on tour with us and be our lead singer? And basically this album was the result of that, the Bongo Fury album. And it's a great album. I mean, it definitely leans more toward Frank Zappa and the Mothers than it does Captain Beefheart. Captain Beefheart's contributions are more kind of poetry that he recites, and there's some accompaniment behind, with the mothers. But he does sing some important moments in the songs that are cool, like the very ending of Muffin Man. I think he brings a lot of power to, and the opening track, Deborah Cadabra, is one of my very favorite Captain Beefheart vocals, period. Now, I have dreamed since hearing the You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore Volume 4 version of The Torture Never Stops, which features Dawn on lead vocals. I have dreamed of hearing one complete concert from this tour in outstanding sound quality. Joe Travers has given us two. You get two shows, the two shows complete that make up the Bongo Fury album. And this is an embarrassment of riches for me. We're not even talking about the fact that Karma and Eric have created a new Dolby Atmos mix, which is just, a victory lap, in my opinion, for this box set. And we're talking about a box that runs for under $70 or something like that. And this is incredible value. And this is going to be one of those rare instances, I think, where I am just as excited for the CD content and extras, studio extras, unreleased tracks, like I believe the Portuguese Lunar Landing track, which is one that's never come out. I believe that's on here. This is so tasty. And I can't wait. And it definitely lessens the sting of the Grace Under Pressure set for me.
Yeah, I mean, even as more of like a casual Zappa fan, you have to admire the work that Joe Travers puts into these sets. And I think Karma and Eric's mixes are just fantastic. I thought the Atmos mix of One Size Fits All was a masterpiece. Yeah. So I'm excited for, anything and everything that they will do from the Zappa catalog. So I'm probably going to be in for this as well.
Super. Well, I don't think this is going to be quite as amazing as One Size Fits All, because again, that's a studio album that has tons of overdubs. And I think that was recorded on 24 track Caribou Ranch and mixture of live material. This is going to be mostly live stuff, but there is some overdubs on the live material. So I imagine it's going to be quite an impressive, immersive experience. And quite frankly, I just can't wait to pound this thing in my eardrums. Like, this is going to be so great. And I haven't even mentioned how much I love this album. Like, if you loved the last few tracks on One Size Fits All, like Andy and San Bernardino, this is going to be more of that sort of thing. Like that kind of hard blues rock with a bit of zaniness thrown into the mix. And it's a lot of the same band. It's George Duke on keyboards, Napoleon Murphy Brock on sax and lead vocals. I believe both Tom Fowler and Bruce Fowler, and newcomer Terry Bozzio on drums, who would later be in bands like Missing Persons, UK. Later played for Jeff Beck. This is his first recording with Frank, so it's gonna be epic, I think.
We should mention as well, they were able to find two more of those vintage 6-channel mixes from the 90s for Deborah Cadabra and one of the other songs. Yeah,
that's going to be delicious. So can't wait. When's it coming?
March 20th.
March 20th. Yeah. It's a month from today as of recording, which will make no sense when this comes out in a few days, but the sooner the better. So now we're into the month of April. And on April 10th, we have this new studio album from Richard Barbieri, the keyboardist from Japan, as well as Porcupine Tree. And I have to admit, I haven't spent any time with Richard's solo material, but I did listen to the preview track of this that's on YouTube, and it's pretty fantastic. I think for the price point, again, this is like a release from 20 years ago. One CD, one Blu-ray. This is a no-brainer for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Same as you. I've only heard him like in the context of those other bands. I think the mystery for this though is who did the surround mix. Because I was wondering, maybe this could be a Steven Wilson mix, but you would think they would have put that all over the packaging when they announced it. So it mentions that the Blu-ray has Atmos in 5.1, but it doesn't say who did it. So I guess the one caveat is that I'd want to know who did the surround mix before pulling the trigger on it. But I think for this kind of music, it's kind of hard to go wrong. It's not like a traditional band. Like, it's all these sort of keyboard sounds and effects and things.
Soundscapes.
Speaking of which, when can we get Japan in surround?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that needs to happen. I think Steven would be up for that. I mean, you know him better than me, but that just seems in his era to me.
I know years ago he had said that he wanted to do the tin drum in 5.1. So maybe it'll happen someday. I don't know.
Yeah, that Japan is one of the most diverse catalogs this side of Roxy Music. So I think that's definitely a catalog that deserves an Atmos update. But regarding your point about who did the Atmos mix, I did listen to the stereo mix that was on YouTube of the song that they previewed, and it sounded suspiciously familiar to me, like the style of the mix. So I wonder if it's Steven. And but I wonder if they're trying to downplay his involvement for some reason. It's an interesting little, why would they do that? But it definitely sounded like his style to me. So this is April 17th, and man, this is one that I don't think I ever saw coming.
Yeah,
the Steven Wilson mix of a Motorhead record. I don't know anything about this. It's on Parole. Is that a record of his? Is it a live album? What's
the story behind it is that it was originally their first record, like the first record the band recorded for United Artists. And then for whatever reason, it was shelved for a while, and they had released these subsequent albums. And then it was put out later. And they had re-recorded a bunch of the songs on it for what actually became their true debut album. So these are the earliest like Motorhead studio recordings, but technically it wasn't their first release. So it looks like they've put together this kind of comprehensive Jethro Tull style box set down to the packaging of like sort of everything that happened during these sessions. And the original On Parole album was mixed by Steven in stereo 5.1 and Atmos. I went and listened to this record because I was curious, because you don't think of Motorhead as a band that has like a ton of layers to them of how it could work in surround. And there's a fair bit of like some of the songs have backing vocals. You have a song like Iron Horse with the multiple guitar parts. And, as we talked about in our video of the best Steven Wilson mixes, like you can always depend on Steven to be creative, especially in these situations where there aren't as many instruments to play with.
Yeah.
You could hear in this album that the drums were recorded like multi-track with the fills going back and forth. So he could do his usual thing of having the toms in the back.
Sure.
But I think, purely on the strength of him being involved with this, I'm curious to hear what it'll sound like.
I am too. And also, I mean, this is Lemmy immediately post being abandoned at the gas station and wherever it was by his Hawkwind bandmates. And it makes me wonder if there's a little bit of Hawkwind influence running through this, since it's his earliest recordings.
I wouldn't say there's like a ton of kind of psychedelicness to this record, at least from, my little bit of time listening to it. It seems like more kind of straight ahead rock. Okay. But his vocals are great on it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it sounds intriguing to say the least. I'm always amazed at what is coming next from Steven Wilson, because he tends to do like the Van Morrison record. Like I just would never have guessed that he would be a fan of that. So it's cool. I dig it. So this is a pair of albums from the band Heaven 17, and this comes out the same day, April 17th, from SDE. And the first record is entitled Penthouse and Pavement, and the second is the Luxury Gap. Now, a friend of mine and a frequent guest on the program, Larry Shore, wrote me and told me these albums are absolutely amazing. But I don't know anything about them. So what do you know about these?
Well, I know that like the band is sort of an offshoot of the Human League.
Yes.
Two of the guys from the Human League had started this other project. I listened to the records for the first time recently, like when they were announced. And I mean, you can listen immediately. You'll think like, wow, this is going to be a great surround mix. There's all these different sort of keyboard layers and things. It's kind of like this sort of dense, like 80s synth pop, kind of in the vein of like, Propaganda, or maybe even like Frankie to a degree. Like it kind of fits in that experimental 80s pop genre, which we've coincidentally seen a lot of surround releases of that style of music. The main reason I'm excited about this is because David Costin did the surround mixes, and pretty much everything I've got from him has been fantastic. You know, the Propaganda record had an incredible Atmos mix. I don't think we ever reviewed that on this channel, but I did a written review of it for IA. Thompson Twins Into the Gap had an incredible Atmos mix. I think he did a great job on Tubular Bells. So, yeah, I think just, you know, on the strength of his involvement, these are going to be great releases. I'm excited. I mean, I'm not excited about having to, you know, what is it? It's like $50 a disc or something, but there's a lot on these. You know, there's instrumental versions, high-res stereo, 5.1. So it's not like they're not doing their best to kind of pack the discs and really make it worthwhile.
Cool. Yeah, I would be interested to hear it. And I know that David Costin worked on the Future Bites, right?
Yeah, he produced the original 10-track record.
Yeah.
And
that's a great sounding record.
And he mixed the stereo version. Yep.
Yeah. So on the same day and from the same label, SDE, this is again April 17th, Mark Knopfler and Emmylou Harris, All the Roadrunning.
So the thing that's interesting to me about this one is, like, as with all the Mark Knopfler releases, it's got a new Atmos mix by Guy Fletcher, who was one of the guys in Dire Straits, and he's sort of Mark's longtime collaborator, co-producer. But on this one, they also found an unreleased 5.1 mix that Chuck Ainlay did, and when this record came out in 2006, that was, you know, prepped ostensibly for SACD or DVDA, but it never came out. And given how good Chuck's mixes are of Sailing to Philadelphia and of Brothers in Arms, like, that's super cool that they're able to finally release that after so long. And I think, as with Brothers in Arms, the vintage 5.1 might be better than the new Atmos mix. Though I know a lot of people have been critical about Guy Fletcher's mixes, but I think his mix of Brothers in Arms is pretty good. I'm not sure if it's better than the 2005 5.1 mix, but I think it's a solid effort.
Cool. And I think we did have a comment on one of our videos recently that, you know, there's not enough folk music. And I think you'd recommended an Emmylou Harris thing. So is this kind of more folky, or is this more like Dire Straits, would you say?
It's definitely more on the sort of folky side. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that might be interesting. On April 24th, we are getting a repress of the great Steven Wilson mix of the first Tears for Fears album, entitled The Hurting. And, you know, I've heard the 5.1 mix. And this is just one of the most fantastic sounding mixes of the era, I think, of that 80s era. But you can talk more eloquently on this, because I think you have this disc, correct?
I do, yes. And I think it was the best-selling SDE disc. The initial run was like 7,000 or 8,000 copies, something like that. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff on the Blu-ray. You know, you have of course, the original stereo mix in high res. You have new mixes by Steven in stereo, 5.1 and Atmos. And also they found these sort of demo versions of, I think it was Watch Me Bleed and Mad Worlds, that were different recordings done with a different producer before and they're like completely different arrangement wise. I mean, I think you can tell why they switched producers. The old ones have a very kind of mechanical feel with all electronic drums, and for the final version, I think they found kind of a nice blend between lots of digital stuff but also some real instruments. And yeah, I mean, what an incredible debut record. Yeah. And even though this album isn't as densely layered as Songs for the Big Chair or especially Seeds of Love, you know, there's plenty to go around in a surround mix.
Yeah, and sometimes it is those albums that are sparser that translate better, because and I think that there was a note about this in the New Order releases.
Stephen Morris.
Yeah, Stephen Morris, and he said that something like our music tends to be really sparse and empty, and he felt like that was conducive to multi-channel music, and I have to agree. Sometimes you don't want to be attacked from all sides, like a lizard or a Tales from Topographic Oceans. Sometimes music with a lot of space really works well spatially. And I would say this is one of the best 80s mixes I've heard from Steven Wilson. And he's got many great 80s mixes. So I'm excited to have this on my shelf. This is one I missed the first time around. And yeah, when it was announced, I decided that I needed to have it. And I just thought it would be a good idea to include it here, because we have had a few comments before on our announcement videos. Hey, when things get repressed, can you let us know? Well, here's an example of something that it was gone for a long time and now it's back. So go get it.
Yeah. If we were to do like a maybe future video idea, top 10 SDE releases, this one would be up there for me.
That's a really good idea. So for those of you watching at home, if you think you would watch a top 10 SDE releases video, let us know in the comments below. All right. So now we're in June. We skipped a whole month. No May releases yet, but I'm guessing there's going to be May releases, and maybe we'll do just a May release video. But this is a Marillion record from the late 90s. I believe this is a 1999 release, and it's entitled Marillion.com. And again, I've never heard this record, so I'll turn this over to you.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when they started doing these Marillion reissues, the first one was Misplaced Childhood back in 2017, which, what a great record. I love that album.
Yeah, but still maybe the best one next to Brave.
I think Clutching at Straws for me is the one. If I meant
in terms of mixes, but yeah, Clutching is an amazing record musically.
I think as far as the music, that would be my pick. I would narrowly take that one over Misplaced Childhood. But I think the initial plan was they were just going to do the 8 records that they made when they were signed to a major label.
Yeah.
Which was Script from a Jester's Tear through Afraid of Sunlight. And they did those, and those are the ones that I have all of those. And I kind of like stopped buying them after that because I feel like the mixes sort of have gotten gradually kind of worse and worse.
Yeah.
The last couple ones have been done by Michael Hunter, who's the band's like longtime producer, mixer. And I think some of his mixes are good. Like I really like the one he did for Afraid of Sunlight, but for Season's End, I wasn't that amazed by that mix. And as a result, I haven't gone for the other ones like they did The Strange Engine. And I guess that brings us to this one. They've done some of their newer records too. Like they did An Hour After Dark, and I think Radiation also had a surround mix. But yeah, like you, I've never heard this record. I don't think it's particularly well regarded in the canon. One interesting fact about it, though, is that Steven Wilson originally mixed a couple songs for this record. It's for the original stereo release.
That is interesting.
I would say kind of these later period records after they left EMI, the one I would be most excited to hear surround of is this record called Marbles that they made in the early 2000s. And again, Steven Wilson also mixed a handful of tracks for that album, so maybe they can get him back for that one. I don't know. But it's cool that they're continuing to do the reissues and that they all have surround sound. None of them have had Atmos yet, though.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe could they go back and do an Atmos mix of Misplaced Childhood or Clutching at Straws or one of those? That would be cool. Yeah, I might be up for that. But I'm going to have to key in an image of Jethro Tull's album, jtull.com. But I always thought it was interesting that both of those albums came out around the same time. Yeah. But they also have similar covers with a figure, a statue in the case of the Tull album, but they're holding a computer screen or something that in the case of the Tull, it's like a flame, but it's like clearly meant to be a computer screen, a monitor. But it's interesting that they both have similar designs and similar titles. But that's about all I have to say, other than the fact that Brave is one of the best 5.1 mixes. So I would highly recommend anybody watching this go check out Brave. Yeah, I would say like of the two kind of, with Fish and with Steve Hogarth, I would say of the surround mixes, Misplaced Childhood's the best one with Fish and Brave is the best one with Hogarth. Easily, yeah. But like we were saying, I think my favorite overall record by them would be Clutching at Straws. Mine as well. Yeah, and it has been for years. So, all right. Now, this is one that it's like, and I'm deliberately not showing it yet, but this is one that it's like every day I wake up and look for an announcement of it. And when there isn't one, I just want to go back to bed because I'm so excited for it. That's Jethro Tull's 1984 album, Under Wraps. Now, here's what we know. So Bruce Sword is doing the mixing. It will include Ian Anderson's solo album, Walk Into Light. And there has been some information leaked on Steve Hoffman about the drum replacement. And it seems like some attempt has been made to replace the drums, but it's clear that they haven't re-recorded the drums. So that's what we know.
And we also know that there is going to be some excellent extras, potentially some new songs, something about a jam session or something, which is unique for Tull. And probably a live show. Dave Rees has teased the fact that it's probably going to be Hammersmith, which is an awesome concert that's been available for trade as a bootleg, but it doesn't appear to be a 5.1 or Atmos mix of the live material. It's probably going to be just a studio thing on disc. But also, it's been hinted at that there's some demo tracks, which I know that there's maybe one or two users on Hoffman who are like, demos, we don't want demos. But you got to think there weren't any Tull demos until the Broadsword set. So the idea of there being Tull demos is very tasty. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this record or maybe haven't heard it in a while, the controversy around it stems from the fact that Ian Anderson chose not to use a live drummer on this material. And apparently they did try one out at one point, and some of the demos include the drummer that they tried out. So that's fascinating. But basically the album was recorded live in the studio to the drum programming. And that would make it very difficult to go back and simply re-record the drums. And I saw an interview, or I read an interview in an old A New Day magazine from Don Perry, who was the drummer who joined for the tour. And he was Tull's longstanding drummer for about 30 years after that. And he said that the drum programming is quite complex. It's multi-layered, maybe 2 or 3 at a time. And he said that it would be essentially impossible for a human drummer to recreate the drum parts that are on the album. It might even take 2 drummers to thoroughly recreate it. And I think this is kind of backed up by the fact that on the tour, they only played about 4 or 5 songs from a 15-track record. So, you know, it's going to be really interesting, I think, to hear what Bruce is able to do with these 2 albums. And it's also his first foray into doing classic catalog mixing. So I'm curious to see what the response is going to be. And also, I would like to see what he's offered next after this. So
yeah,
any day is a good day to announce this thing, Warner. Come on, do your thing.
In the anticipation, I've been like kind of digging into it. And I got to say, like, I really enjoy a lot of the tracks on this record. I think, you know, Ian had some great melodies. I think the vocal production on this record is amazing. Yes. All the different like sort of overdubs and like self harmonies that he's doing on this record. Like you think about a song like Paparazzi or like Astronomy, all those different vocal parts. And it's interesting looking back at what the band has said about this record over the years. I think both Ian and Martin Barre have said like they had a great time making this record, and they consider the songs some of the best that they ever worked on together. But of course, Ian has been like, oh, you know, like I don't like the drum machine. Like I want to replace it with real drums. So I'm curious how it'll sound, what they came up with. Because I agree with you that I think just overdubbing a human drummer on top of this wouldn't necessarily work because of the nature of sort of how mechanical some of the patterns are, and also the fact that the band themselves were reacting to the drum machine when they were tracking it. So it's not quite so simple as you could just sort of drop a regular drummer on top of it. So I think if it didn't sound good, they wouldn't be putting it out like this. So
yeah, right. And another issue that I have with it is that because of the fact that they used the Lynn drum machine, it kind of has this adverse effect on the dynamics, where all the songs tend to be at kind of the same level.
And it's also very thin sounding. Like
it's very thin sounding.
The bass parts are mixed quite low on the original mix. So I'm hoping, if anything, like in the remix, they could just sort of pump up the bass a little bit so you could, you know, really feel something from this material.
We want to hear more Dave Pegg, who famously, by the way, said that the outtakes from Broadsword and the Beast would have made a better album.
Well, you know, now that we've heard those, like, they're pretty good.
Yeah, he might have had a point, but
I mean, a lot of those are great. You know, like Lights Out, The Curse. Those are all great tunes. Yeah. Personally, I'm hoping that there's a Walk into Light Sessions version of Inverness Sleeper, which is one of those legendary lost Tull tracks that we were always told was a Walk into Light outtake, and then suddenly it appeared on the Broadsword and the Beast sessions, and it was like, wow.
well, I didn't expect to hear that. So I'm kind of interested to see if there's a Walk in Delight demo of that included. But just some thoughts on this album. Like, I don't consider it the worst Tull album by any stretch. I know a lot of people say it was. And you know, I don't consider it to be the best album either. It's always been somewhere in the middle for me. But the thing is with some of those, like, you know, I'm kind of in the middle on albums, is that they can be the most interesting ones. And I don't think that Tull were ever this audacious again. And, you know, Ian Anderson seems to have a habit of allowing whatever the fan response is to kind of overtake his own impression of an album over the years. Like, you know, like a Passion Play, which was, you know, totally savaged by the critics at the time, but loved by most fans, many fans. I mean, it did reach #1 in the United States. That's an album that, you know, he may say now he went too far on, but fans love. In this case, this is an album that was probably critically derided as well as derided by the fans. So I can kind of get why he would say, you know, we should have re-recorded the drums and all that. But there was a time, I think, when he was proud of this album. And it did indicate some sort of ambition that I think in later years was scaled back. Like when you get to Crest of a Knave, as good of an album as it is, we are definitely heading in, and I hate to use the Mark Knopfler reference because it's lazy, but we are kind of heading in that direction, more like kind of Heartland music direction. So with the exception of Roots to Branches, which is one of my favorite Tull records.
I was just going to mention, like, you had encouraged me to listen to that record and I had never heard it before. And yeah, what a great album.
I'm glad you liked it, because that was my first rock concert, was the Roots to Branches tour. And I hope that that's considered for a remix with the show. I'm hopeful that going forward with the series that they do eventually get to Roots to Branches and decide to include Divinities with it, and maybe a Divinities concert. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. All this is to say, you know, come on, it's time to announce this thing, because in the latest A New Day magazine from about 2 weeks ago, Dave Rees said that the box sets were going to the press. So they should be, I don't mean like press, but I mean, they were to the pressing plant. So they're in manufacturing right now. So it's only a matter of time until we get notification on this.
I think any day now. Hopefully it isn't announced between when we do this video and when it comes out.
Hopefully it wasn't announced while we were recording this video, because I got a couple of buzzes, but no, I don't believe it has been. But anyway, folks, don't forget to let us know in the comments below which one of these releases, or any number of these releases, you plan to pick up. I have become an official Amazon affiliate. So I will link some pre-order links in the description. So if you'd like to support the channel in a small, but of course meaningful way, please do consider ordering through these links. Before we sign off, Jonathan, and hey, if I'm putting you on the spot here, just say so. Can you tease anything coming from Immersive Audio album in the next few months?
There's a pretty big release that I'm very excited about that I can't say anything about yet, but I think it will be quite imminent.
Cool. Very cool. Well, you'll have to come back and tell us all about that when it's time.
Yes.
So Jonathan, I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to remind any of you who are watching that I do look at my analytics, and I have noticed that about 40 to 50% of my viewers aren't subscribed. So if you could please click on the subscribe button, make sure you're subscribed. You know, sometimes you are subscribed and you get kicked off for some reason, but I also want to implore you to subscribe to Jonathan's Immersive Audio album channel. He and I are going to do a video, or we have done a video,
yes,
on how to play digital download Atmos files. And we talked about this little guy, the Neumi Atom 4K, which I will also link in the description if you'd like to purchase. But the only way to see that video is to make sure you're subscribed to both of our channels, because that will also be a collaboration. But until then, this has been a lot of fun, and looking forward to what's next for Immersive Audio. Take care, Jonathan. Thank you so much.
Same to you.